earliest memories are going through the 30s, actually. That's when, you know, the height of the 30s, when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. And
What year were you born in?
in 1931. Pardon? It's January 26th.
January 26th. So you were born right here?
Pardon?
You were born here?
Yeah.
In this house or in this area?
No, there was another old homestead house here. No, that was, but in those days, you know, you just couldn't jump in a car and just drive to the hospital or anything like that. There was neighbor ladies that come and help as midwives in those times, I think. And the road to Maple Creek, man, that was just a trail to begin with, and then it was graded into a dirt road, and it was a journey.
Okay.
In those days, like in the late 30s and early 40s, and up until close to the 50s. But I started the school in Sunshine Valley. That was about 3.5 miles southwest of here. And my first teacher was Mabel Tasky. And I remember I couldn't speak a word of English when I went to school.
What language did you speak?
Slovak.
Ah.
My father and mother came from Slovakia. Dad homesteaded here in 1912. And so he started out with 4 horses.
Wow.
And he was here until, well, he didn't get married until 1930. I don't remember how I learned English. You know, I mean, it just seemed to kind of coming into your head. You know, so.
Tom Stetter, Homestead, day 5, approximately 1921. It says.
Yeah, that's about the time that picture would have been taken.
Tom Stetter.
Yeah.
Whitewashing J. Compton Homestead Log House about 1914.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. That was before the flu hit. The flu hit about 1918,
Wow.
and that's when he died. And that was at the end of November. In those days, there was no such thing as the undertaker coming out and taking care of everything. You know, the bodies were wrapped in blankets and carried into this granary. They laid there until the neighbors got together, dug the graves. I think somebody built the rock boxes. There were no coffins that I know of. But Helen, she was just probably about a year and a half, 2 years old. Her mother died. And the rough boxes would have to be made. The bodies would have to be placed in them. And, you know, it took time.
Yeah.
We'd have to ride out and call the neighbors, you know, tell them about it, and come and help do this you know, the interment. And that's what I would imagine would have happened at that time, because the only communication they would have had out of here would be the telegraph, CPR telegraph. There were no phones, and the roads, well, they were pretty rudimentary. They'd be just trail, mostly trails, I imagine. Yeah, I remember we used to ride to school. Annie had a white mare called Sadie, and I had a little pony that I rode, and she was the most stumbliest thing. Just stumbled 3 or 4 times on our way to school, and I'd get pitched over her head.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't have a saddle. Annie had the saddle. I had just the kind of a stirrup affair, kind of a girdle. And she wasn't very high, so she wasn't hard to get onto, like I mean, with that outfit. I'd hold it down one hand and put my foot in the stirrup, and so we kept going to school on horseback and or on foot sometimes too, until about 1946, when that school closed, and we went to Lammermoor School opened, and we went there. And my first teacher there was Hilda Kuffner. That was her first school too. She was only 17.
Wow.
And I remember some of the things that went on there. We had a barn there and for the horses, and 2 outdoor biffies. There was no indoor toilets in those days.
No.
And like in Lammermoor's, like in Sunshine Valley School, most of the teachers were quite strict. You had to be quiet in class. There was no running around, no yakking or anything. If you wanted to borrow a book, you held up one finger. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, you held up 2 fingers. Everything was quiet. And
Really?
so none it's like they have in school these days. It's appalling.
Wow, talk about a change, eh?
So anyway, I remember the first inspector, school inspector that dropped in was a Mr. Henwood. He was a jolly fellow. He dropped in right at school ended at that day one day, and he had a little brown dog with him too. So then that's school closed and we went to, I remember, I went there to 1947 to 49. Then I went to Council High School. And it wasn't easy in those days, there were no buses. The buses were just, I don't remember when the buses started up, but that was after I was out of school. And it was just a two-room school in Council at that time, a high room and a low room.
Oh, really?
Yep. And that building was, but I don't know whether it's still there. I think maybe the library might be part of that. It might be that building now, but I'm not sure. But anyway, Mr. Lytle, Mr. Rogers were the teachers. And who else was taught there? And then I finished my high school correspondence. But,
So how did you find it learning the language?
you mean learning English?
Mhm.
I don't remember. It just seemed to kind of like a fog settled in, and then I seemed to know it. I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, they say children before 6 are really able to master many languages, and then after 6 it becomes really challenging.
Yeah, a little harder. Well, that's probably true.
That's interesting how you describe that. It just
I
comes in
didn't
like
either.
a fog, and you remember. You're doing it, I guess.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh!
that's a little model I made. I took the close up.
You made that?
That was a model.
Oh my gosh! Look at it. I'm just gonna hold it up. She can zoom in on it. That's beautiful. So what's
Oh,
it a
wow.
replica of?
Well, a covered wagon.
They,
But there was an auction sale out west here. I took it there and I donated it to the Red Cross, and they held it up for auction and brought $1.
so have you always had a penchant for building things?
Yeah, handcrafts. Yeah. I've built several boats, a Western stalk saddle with reflective telescope.
Wow.
Several clocks. I kind of got into the clock business. I built several clocks for different people. So stamp collecting is my hobby, and I like to read a lot. I do a lot of reading. I find it really, instead of traveling the world, you got the stories right there.
It's true, isn't it?
So it's,
Did your parents or did your dad teach you how to make those?
no. You see, in those days there was no such a thing as curling rink or skating rink. You didn't really have much to do in the wintertime. You were really cooped up here. You couldn't get out very easy. There was, the road was snowed in, and we used to go into town with a sleigh and team. Usually when the weather cleared up, it looked like it was going to be nice weather.
So your parents must have been very brave too.
Well, all those people that came out here, to Homestead, took a lot of courage. You were
Yeah.
a long ways for a doctor. You were a long ways for anything. Miles and miles. In those days, even to Vidora from here was a journey, because that was 14. It'd be about 7 and probably 13 or 14 miles.
Yeah.
And the road didn't take a shortcut like it does now. You went on the square.
So before, I just wanted to record your parents' names. What are your mother's name and
My
your
mother's
father's
name was Anna. Her maiden name was,
Klukpak?
yeah.
Klukpak or Kluk?
The
Kluk or Kluk?
European pronunciation, same as German too. It's
Huh.
yeah.
Aw,
It's a geranium. I remember that geranium.
do you?
She had it for quite a few years after.
When would that have been?
That picture there, I think she's in her wedding dress.
And you remember the geranium? That's neat.
She had that for a long time, quite a
That's
few
neat.
years.
She good with growing things like plants and
Yeah, she
garden
did, yeah.
and
She died of tuberculosis in 1939, and she was only 37 when she died. I remember she was at the Fort Sand for a while and came home, and she wasn't supposed to do any work, but she had a garden and she'd carry water from the creek, and when Dad wasn't around, and then he'd see that and he'd get mad as a dick and say, "You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to rest," but she wanted to keep her plants going. So there's a picture of Sunshine Valley School in 1940. 1943. There's me there. And there's my sister right beside me. There's 4 people that are dead already out of this group. That's Larry Sodden, there's Lorna Sodden, there's Harry Wagner, this is Ken here. He got killed in an accident a long time ago. And Melora, she died here. That was the Wagner family. And that was the two Goddard boys. Oh, wait a minute, there's a Gordage boy there and there. Yep. That school had the windows fairly low, so that when you looked out from your desk, you could daydream out the window. But Lammermoor was just the opposite. They knew they had the windows, fairly high, so that when you sat down, you couldn't look out the window. If you look up if you stood up, but not when you're sitting
Nothing
down.
to daydream about. That's no fun for school.
But I can still remember the familiar smell of the schoolhouse. It had that dust-stained floor, and it had that chalk smell. Wonderful smell. And the inkwells, we used to have those desks with the inkwells. We'd have a big bottle of ink in the library and you'd fill them. And
The smell.
some of the regiments, the different teachers had too. But I enjoyed school. Art was the last class in Fridays. I enjoyed art too. Art last period. And we went these schools here. Well, even I don't remember whether Lammermoor had that, but Sunshine Valley School. It ran till the end of till Christmas, and then it shut down for 2 months because in the wintertime it wasn't easy to travel. It was just too tough to travel to school in wintertime. So then we started again in March, and we had 1 week of holidays in July, first week, and then back to school again.
Who's this?
That would be that boy here in that picture.
So
that was in 1934. That's him right there.
So you had wanted you had just started telling a story about this family. Did you want to maybe share
Well,
that
I
story?
wanted to tell a story because I don't think nobody else knows about it. There's only one left living, like I say, it was Helen, and I think she's the one that's the baby here. You can't see her. And what happened to them? And that was a tough time. I mean, he took over his mother.
Him.
That's right, Joe. He was a stepson to these other, that boy there's Alex.
Mm-hmm.
And, he washed diapers, he took care of the little baby, for, a few years before he left home. That family owed a lot to him.
It's like in Italy how they have Mamma Mia.
Pardon?
Mamma Mia's there's a man who sometimes steps into that role to take care in Italy, but different circumstances.
What else can you do?
They do it.
It's got to be done. It's pneumonia is what killed him, that flu. You get pneumonia and lungs will get filled up and you just fade away. That's what happened to them.
So was your family very close to them then always?
We were neighbors and worked together like their dad worked together with them quite a bit. Helped each other out. Used to go over there and visit them.
So tell me about your dad. What was he like as a...
Well, he was a very good father. He treated us real well. He brought us up after Mother died. I was 8 years old and Annie was 7 when Mother died. He left him with a lot of hard work.
So yeah, he was working and
trying to farm and how kids can be. But we didn't give them such an easy time lots of times either.
So it was you and your sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know how kids are. You
can't help it.
Yeah,
you're a kid.
He gave me the strapping a lot of times, and I'm glad he did. Terrible rear end. There's a comedian picture in Senate 1942. That's me and that's my sister, that's my dad.
Oh my gosh,
I had grown out of the suit.
Oh my gosh, that's a great picture.
Couldn't afford another suit.
Yeah.
So you used it. You got into it. If you could still get into it, you used it.
Yeah, I stopped there for.
The first communion confirmation.
In Senate, 1942.
Church, Dad and his neighbor, the ones who live west here, Compton, came home from the bush. That was a 3-day trip in those days.
Wow.
To the West Block.
Wow.
You took 1 day with 2 teams to go up there, 1 day to cut and load, and the next 1 day to come back.
So you learned to farm from your father and from...
Well, I grew up with it.
Yeah.
I had to help and I had to do the chores, lots of chores and all that stuff. Everybody did the same thing. But a lot of these people, where they came from, they didn't have anything there. Like from the old country, came in here, they had nothing. So you come over here and a quarter section of land for $10. But even these people here that, you know, that big profit, you know, I mean, they just had a half a section. And,
Yeah.
You know, to try to scratch out a living, the men had to, you know, go to work in the wintertime, to the mine, to earn a few bucks.
Sounds like a lot of people survive the 30s too, just having their garden or just having a little bit to trade with other people.
Well, in those days, they had the relief, $10 a month for a family,
Oh my
and
gosh.
$5 a month for bachelors,
For,
or single man,
wow.
$5 a month. But things were a little cheaper then. But then the worst part is for those people in those days was if somebody was seriously ill, you know, that really hurt, you know, hospital stay and a sick parent away from home, you know. My mother spent lots of days in the hospital. We went to see her in the Weyburn Hospital in December, for 1 week, 1 whole week. We went there before Christmas. That's the last I saw my mother. I still got the telegram.
You do? So what did,
She died in 39. I still got I even got the postcard when she arrived in Canada on the SS Mount Cobb.
wow,
That was in 1930.
wow.
She the ship left Hamburg, was in St. John's, came to St. John's, on the SS Mount Cobb. And she was, I can remember her being home here, and you know, she had TB of the lungs. I remember her coughing up blood at the hospital. She was an advanced case. And in those days, you know, penicillin would have cured it, you see. But now, what they did was just, they kept them in the hospital with complete rest, with no exertion of any kind. And, so she ended up in the hospital, and she became so depressed, she became kind of mental and didn't want to cooperate with anybody. Of course, she was in a strange land, couldn't speak the language. Here's a bunch of people, you know.
So what are some of the big lessons, I've been asking other people this, what are some of the lessons that your parents maybe instilled in you?
Well, to be thrifty and do your share of work, good share of work. And be honest, you know,
Mm-hmm.
be fair, be good to your neighbors, and things like that. You know, you can't, I know I've had experience with lots of different people.
So it sounds like they had strong values, your parents.
I didn't really get to know my mother that well. You know, she was you know, from 1931 when I was born, and when she died in 39, you know, she was away quite often at the hospital. You know. And, so I didn't really get to know my mother that well. But, yeah, and,
Part of what I find so fascinating is the stories of the people like your mom and dad who came and not only were dealing with the land, but also language, culture shock, missing their own family probably back home. I mean, it's a real courage that it took to do that.
well, the biggest courage I think it took was to come into a land where there was no communication, no telephones, no electric power, nothing.
Yeah.
And then being a long ways from anywhere, like Maple Creek, you know, was you know, 60 miles away from here, you know, and with a team and a wagon, well, or a buggy even, that still was a long ways. And in the winter time, we took chances, you know, I mean, to be out here, if you got sick or a broken arm or bone or whatever, you know, to get to a hospital, you know, it was that was quite an undertaking.
So did your family use Battle Creek then as your water source? And
Well, we do for cattle and for what we have here is I have a pipeline and it runs into the pressure system and then down to the water bowl.
okay.
And we tapped out flushing the toilet instead of using the cistern water.
Mm-hmm.
You have to haul water from the cistern once every 2 months to fill it for the household. But you know, in those days, we used to drink water right out of the creek. And we're still here. And you hear all about these E. coli and stuff, you know. We used to drink water out of the creek, and you know, there was snakes in there, there was beaver and muskrat and water bugs, and ducks swam in it, and people swam in it up above. And
Tougher bodies.
well, you see, you got used to it, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's all the water we had. And then I remember in 1937 when the creek really dry, there were just potholes. You know, I mean, the fish would go.
What year was this?
About 37.
Oh, I've heard other people talk about this.
Yeah, and there would be just these low spots, sandy holes with hundreds of fish in there. You know, just for a little while. I remember Dad using a snowboard and barrel and getting the water from the creek and hauling it to the house here.
How did they cope when there was no water like that?
Well, some people did have wells, like further north here, around Rob Sargent Council, there was, you know, there was some wells that produced a fair amount of water. Like this Common family, they dug several holes there right near that gate in the coulee bottom. And I guess one well did produce a fair amount of water, but I remember Lou talking about having to chase the cows down to the creek here every day in the wintertime, once a day, and then back again. And here we just sit back, watch television, press the button.
I know. Go microwave our dinner.
We don't know how easy we have it now. 1921 Dodge car. It was an open top with leather upholstery, and he had a lean-to here, kept it inside here in the lean-to. In fact, parts of it are still kicking on here.
Wow.
And then the dirty 30s hit, and everybody made Bennett buggies out of them.
Yeah, I guess, hey?
Took the motors out and hitched the beam to them. I hope those kind of tough times never come around again, though.
So that's one of the ways that people, I'd never heard of that before. So people just took the motor out of the car and hitched a team to
Yeah,
it?
put a tongue in front of it. We got
Oh,
the tongue
it
in,
smokes.
oh yeah, you see pictures of that.
Wow.
I remember Dad had a Bennett buggy made out of the rear end of that car, and like the rear wheels and so on. I remember we went to Senate one time with that thing, and coming back, the bearing went out of one wheel, and we stopped at Wilcox's. That was late in the day. I don't remember what happened after that or how we got home. I remember that part. Another time we used to use the buggy and team to go into, well, we drove a team and a single horse and buggy to go to school then too. We drove Lammermoor School. And you know how a buggy is put together. It's got a kind of a seat in the back there, you know. And you got nothing to hang on to really, you know. So if the horse jumps, down you go and you hit the ground. If it comes off on you, down you go.
One of the things that I'm interested in hearing with people is, what do you think the best thing about this life, like when your parents or you decided to stay here, what makes this a good life here?
Well, in comparison with some other lives, like you mean?
Farming here, you know, first of all farming, but then such tough land. You know, for people who aren't from here, what makes this a special place, would you say?
Well, some of the more obvious things are, we've got peace and quiet. It's on top of the economic part. But and there's very little crime. I mean, you don't have to worry about burglars. We never lock the house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but then touch wood, maybe someday it'll happen to us. But you know, when you got room and you got privacy, that means a lot.
Yeah.
You know, like I dread the thought of retiring and moving to a town or somewhere where you got the neighbors decide you got to be quiet. You can't go out and shoot your gun or anything like that. You know. And,
But freedom here, I guess that's part of what attracted the older generation, was there's a freedom you can have here.
well, I think it was mostly economic though. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, where they came from, like where my dad came from, there was about 7 or 8 in the family, and what they used to do there, they had no money. So if one little land they had, they used to divide it up here. This son gets this little few yards of ground and so on, and pretty soon you run out of, you know, you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So that's why there was a big tide of immigration from those countries, because, you know, the economics just didn't support them.